What is the most fascinating thing, because it is very rare to see such kind of entrepreneur having this kind of balanced mindset. So
Right.
because we have seen all that kind of hustle culture.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
would like to explore a little bit about it. Where did you pick up this mindset? Remaining calm and balance and all that kind of stuff.
I do hustle, right?
Hmm.
The way I like to think of it is that it's a marathon with periodic sprints.
It just reminds me of the novel Ravikant. So you had a similar kind of personality.
And, they're talking about something. I go, "Well, how hard could that be? I could do that." So, this naivete came in and I just decided I'm going to do it. So I started that way. It was just that simple. And then one thing led to another. Well, what do? I got to, form a company. Then I have to do this. And, slowly, I put the pieces together and I built the company.
Totally wonderful. And I totally love this approach because most of the time people often tend to overcomplicate things.
Yeah. Yeah. They overthink it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And
Yeah.
they just stuck in that analysis paralysis loop. And
Yeah.
months and months and years into the researching phase. How do I start this? I'm
Yes.
gonna do this,
Yes.
I'm gonna do this. But on the action side, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you have to take the plunge and just sometimes just do it. When people ask me, how do you manage all, like
Mm.
what do you do? So the most important thing that I would like to share is that number one, you gotta maintain or you have to mind your state of mind. That's prime directive, right? Because if you get into a negative situation, then everything else falls apart. Your business, including your personal life and your
Yeah.
health,
Right.
right? So, so you have to learn the tricks of staying in that positive mindset. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm gonna fail at this, and oh, I suck at this. Yeah,
Hmm.
you suck at it. So what? Pull up your pants and let's go. You have to be able to believe that you'll figure it out, right? And you can do that when you have a, a, a not negative mindset.
What kept you going? Like how did keep your sanity in check, that I need to keep going, I need to keep going? Because I've seen lots of people, they lose themselves in that phase. They lose their heart. They just stuck there.
It's a good question. So one of the things that I think helped me is that
Hello, hi, AJ. How are you doing?
good about yourself.
All good, all good. AJ, first of all, thank you so much for being the adjustment on such a short notice, man. Much appreciated.
No problem at all. No problem. It happens, we have to
Yeah,
navigate these situations.
absolutely, absolutely. So, AJ, your one-liner bio, a family man who loves to build the things, and a
Right.
deep thinker. So
Yeah.
before moving on to the marketing side, business side, and the entrepreneurial side, all that kind of side, first I would like to explore a little bit about your backstory.
Okay. All right. Where do you want me to start?
Yeah, just
Uh,
let us go through a little bit about who is
okay.
AJ.
All right. So I was born in the Congo, so in the heart of
Mhm,
Africa,
mhm,
and I came to Canada when I was 5 years old as a refugee because they kicked us out from the Congo. Uh, when I arrived here, my dad got a heart attack, and so it was me, my mother, and my two sisters, and you know, one thing led to another. Uh, I started a company. This is the company that I have now. In the process, actually, before the starting the company, I got married. Then, as I was building the company and pivoting, many pivots, had two children, and now they're 21. one of them is going to be 21 and the other one's going to be is 17. So they're growing up. And here I am in with you.
Absolutely, absolutely amazing. And what is the most fascinating thing, because it is very rare to see such kind of entrepreneur having this kind of balanced mindset. So
Right.
because we have seen all that kind of hustle culture.
Yes.
So I
Yes.
would like to explore a little bit about it. Where did you pick up this mindset, remaining calm and balance and all that kind of stuff?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So in you know, I do hustle, right?
Hmm.
The way I like to think of it is that it's a marathon with periodic sprints. Like, so when I was younger, my sister would tell me, my elder sister would always tell me, when I got my kids, that it goes fast, and before you know it, they'll be grown up. So make sure you don't waste this time. She would always be telling me this. And so that's where after a while of her telling me this, I started thinking more about it. And especially when my son was born,
Hmm.
it became apparent that I'll give you a story. I'll give you a story. So I was in front of the TV. I was on my laptop. I was working, and I was my son was in his whatever the rocker thing is, and I'm rocking him with my foot, and I'm coding, and the TV's over there, and he was about 6 months old at this time, like maybe under 6 months old.
Hmm.
And I think, what the hell did I do with my time before this? Like that's way more important than what I've done before or anything else. And I was building the company at the time. So that was, what my sister was telling me, plus, this event kind of made me realize that I should make sure that I take the time and not lose these opportunities. So that was kind of like what kind of helped me balance a little bit, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely, totally amazing. And it just reminds me of the novel Ravikant. So you had a similar kind of personality,
Right.
because I'm such a huge fan of his work, how he does things, how he take the things. So yeah, absolutely, that's quite wonderful. And so AJ, when you started your company, and you've started from the consulting perspective, right? And then eventually you move to the product based company.
Okay, that was actually my second pivot. When I
Right, right.
originally started, it was a .com, and I tried, I built a service that I tried to fund raise some money
Mhm.
to build it to go forward. I had a functional system. I got to the VCs in Silicon Valley. I got to the top VCs.
Mm.
But by the time I got there, the .com bubble burst. I'm probably aging myself by saying this because that means I've been around for a while, and so when that happened, I was faced with either closing the company or doing something else. So instead of closing the company, I chose to do consulting, and that's how I got into the consulting part of my career,
Mhm.
right? Then after that, I got into the product.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
so that was kind of like the transition. Started as a company, then that didn't work out. Did consulting for 7 years, right? Maybe a little longer. By that time, then I was building the product, on the side, and eventually the product had enough sales that I didn't have to do consulting anymore.
Right, right. So right from the if we see the timeline, and we see right from the beginning. So you started as a programmer first.
Yeah. So my background is I'm a self-taught coder. Programmer coder. Like I went
Mm-hmm.
to I went to college for hardware stuff, right? So I did some hardware. So I had some technical training in school, but we didn't do much software. We did very little bit of assembly. That was it. And then when I got out, I was very curious and interested with Next computers and the mock operating system and message passing and object-oriented programming. And so I went that way, and I had to learn it on my own.
Absolutely, totally wonderful. And then eventually you started your company and you build it from the scratch and you.
Yes, so I started. A lot of people ask me like, what was the trigger for you starting the company, right?
Mhm.
So at the time, I was doing a little bit of consulting. So I was working somewhere, and then I decided to, you know, life happened, and I had to do some consulting, a little bit of consulting. So I was doing some consulting, and I'm watching this TV show, and they're talking about something. I go, "Well, how hard could that be? I could do that." So, this naivete came in and I just decided I'm going to do it. So I started that way. It was just that simple. And then one thing led to another. Well, what do I do? I got to, form a company. Then I have to do this. And, slowly, I put the pieces together, and I built the company.
Totally wonderful. And I totally love this approach because most of the time people often tend to overcomplicate things.
Yeah. Yeah. They overthink it. They overthink it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And they
Yeah.
just they just stuck in that analysis paralysis loop. And
Yeah.
months and months and years into the researching phase. How do I start this? I'm
Yes.
gonna do this,
Yes.
I'm gonna do this. But on the action side, nothing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's you have to take the plunge and just sometimes just do it, right? I mean, it turned out that I was just in the right place, like in terms of my life cycle. I'd just
Mm.
gotten married and my wife was supportive, right? If she wasn't supportive, it might be a different problem, but
Mm.
different situation. But she was supportive, and so it gave me the courage to kind of continue, right? Or just do it, right? Like I didn't think too much, really, to be honest, in terms of whether she would support me or not. I just did it, but she supported me. So that was important.
Totally, totally, absolutely love that. And I'm sure you had lots of challenges because
Oh, yeah, I still have challenges.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And one of the things which I love the most that which I'm sure you teach a lot, that how to navigate rough times, how to navigate rough patches. Because as an entrepreneur, at first you
Yep.
have to do everything on your own. You are your salesperson, you are checking the marketing side, tech side,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
is you. VA is you, CEO is you.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
So
that's 100%. 100%. So, one of the things when people ask me, how do you manage all, like
mm,
what do you do? So the most important thing that I would like to share is that number one, you gotta maintain or you have to mind your state of mind. That's prime directive, right? Because if you get into a negative situation, then everything else falls apart. Your business, including your personal life and your
yeah,
health,
yeah,
right? So so you have to learn the tricks of staying in that positive mindset. And there are various tricks. We can go into some of that. And it's not necessarily positive mindset, but it's a level-headed, not negative. You don't want to be like, oh, I'm gonna fail at this, and oh, I suck at this. Yeah, you
mm,
suck at it. So what? Pull up your pants and let's go, right? You have to be able to believe that you'll figure it out, right? And you can do that when you have a, a not negative mindset, right? So that's
absolutely.
that's a key thing. And then after that, of course, you take care of your health, because if you don't have your health, you're screwed. You can't do anything.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I would definitely love to explore some of the methods which you just mentioned. How to
Yeah.
keep your
So
sanity in check.
I wish I'd learned this sooner, was journaling, right? So I remember I used to do this one thing is when I would get a little overwhelmed, I would just start writing and just take dump my brain on paper, right? And but I would only do that when I got into this overwhelmed state. So now what I do is I journal, well, pretty much every day. Not necessarily every day, but almost every day. And in that process, I ask myself various questions during the journaling process. Um, and what that does is whenever I am faced with a challenge, the 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 difference between a positive and a negative outcome is if you'll relate to this. Like if you have multiple options, you hit the wall and
Yeah,
you have multiple options, oh, I got other options I can look at. But if you hit the wall and you have no other options, then all of a sudden you're now in a negative state because you have no other options.
yeah,
So the act of journaling and the act of asking yourself questions in the journaling process, you need to ask yourself questions, like the questions you need to solve or what have you. And you may repeat that multiple times. That's not a problem, right? You develop options. Like, what would I do about this if this happened? Or what would I do about that? Right? And then you prevent getting into a negative state because you always have options, because in your journaling process, you have those options, right? You develop those options. So these are a couple of tricks that I've used. And the other one is, you got to sometimes take a vacation. You have to take the time to recharge, to recharge the battery. And in fact, that's one of the tests to see that you're building your business properly is the ability for you to take a vacation. If you can't take a vacation, you got to say, okay, what do I have to fix so that I can take even a 2 day vacation
yeah.
sometimes, or a 3 day vacation, or, and you get to the point where you can get to 3, 4 weeks of vacation.
Absolutely, totally love that. And yeah, it totally makes sense because when you write things down, it brings so much clarity
Yes.
that
Yes. That's the other benefit. It
yeah,
it does bring clarity, right? You get all this jumble in your
yeah,
head, and writing it down. However you do it, whether you do it on a whiteboard
mm,
or you just it's a good process to do.
absolutely. And most of the times, problems are not as much bigger as you thought earlier.
Yes. Yeah. 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 When it's swirling in your head, it seems
Yeah,
way bigger than it
yeah,
actually is.
absolutely,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. And so I've seen some entrepreneurs, they've gone through this kind of cycle, they burned out.
Hmm.
So I think these tricks will help them
Yeah. 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 You
to
you
keep
know you
going.
want to as a entrepreneur, or even as somebody that is not an entrepreneur and you're
Mm,
in a high pressure environment, you really need to, this is one of the core skills. Just like how you would learn how to program, you got to learn how to recharge the battery and how to prevent burnout. Because once you get to burnout, I've seen people burn out, it's not good. Like they
yeah,
completely lose motivation. It takes them months to get out of it. It can cause so many problems, right? So you don't want to get there, and this is one of the risks of actually a lot of people in modern society. It's one of the risks. And so you just need to listen to yourself and be aware that it's a marathon, not a sprint. And you need to see the signals, the KPIs or the early indicators that, oh, I gotta recharge, because if I don't recharge, I burn out, that you're messed up for many, many, many months, right? Could lose a job, for example, if you're, or a gig or whatever, because when, I don't know, have you seen somebody that's actually burnt out?
yeah. Most of the time, they seem stressed out.
Yeah,
Like
they're
things,
stressed out,
things.
but they can't even
Mm,
function. Like when
yeah,
when I've seen people that when they've gotten burnt out, they can't even function properly, right?
but
So
mm,
that's not a good place to be.
yeah. I mean, that's a really dangerous part.
Yeah, yeah, and it's something that is a risk for lots of people, and we just gotta make sure that they know that they need to plan, they need to prepare, they need to be able to see the signal, and when they see the signal, do something, right? Don't let it, don't keep going.
Absolutely, totally, totally. And this just led to another thing, which I think. it is the core that what drives you.
It's a good question. I would say that what drives me is there's a few things. One of them is not to be average. Okay. The other one is I don't want I want to do good things so that I can feel good about myself. It's a bit selfish, right? But that's what drives me. Also, like the reason that I build the software that I build
Mm,
is because I believe in small business and I believe in the individual being able to build a business. What if it's small or big doesn't matter, but build a business. It provides them with a better quality of life if they do it right, and then they can provide employment to other people. It can be the start of a much bigger business that would provide employment to many more people, right?
yeah, yeah,
So I think it's a noble thing to do to be in small business, and our software helps small businesses. That's what we do, and that's what wakes me up. So I feel like I'm helping that way make a positive change. And then on the other side, I just don't want to be average. So those are the two things that kind of move me forward.
totally makes sense. Totally
Although I
makes
am
sense.
average, I'm an average guy. That's one of my descriptions somewhere.
Yeah, totally, totally makes sense because if you think about this, anyone who's doing something larger than themselves,
Yeah,
there has to be something which is the at their core, which is driving them to do something which is not
yeah,
orderly.
yeah.
So I think it is very important to figure out at your own. And most of the times people don't question their whys so much.
Yeah, and it's really, ultimately is like, how can I help other people?
Mm.
How can I help other people? And that is, even if that's small, that's a positive that gives you some things, right? Like think of the some people that have accomplished great things in history, right? It's a lot, some of them, not all of them, some of them have been all just basically they just wanted to help, right? And ballooned from there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So when you were starting the company and when you were early days, so what are the top challenges which you face, which starting entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, they
Yeah.
look to, so that they can avoid those pitfalls?
So, um, the top thing that so first layer, remember I spoke about your mental state, your health, right? So
Mm,
that's one thing. The second thing is getting clarity on who you're selling to and what you're selling and why. Like what's different and what advantage would you provide and what would you do different. And it can, there's so many angles there, right? Like you can offer the same service for cheaper, which I don't recommend, but like that kind of idea. You can say, hey, we're doing some of this stuff, but with new technology, which gives you the disadvantages, etc. Right? Like you find something that the market wants,
yeah.
and then you find a way to provide that in a cheaper way, or in your case, it's cheaper, but you still charge the same, so you got good margin, right? Or it's something completely different that is leaps and bounds better than what they're currently using in that particular market. So I think that's an important piece of like, what am I offering to who? Who's my, they say ICP, ideal client profile or ideal customer profile, right? And how am I selling it to them, right? Because in any business, again, this is the same thing with our software here, is like in any business, there is no business without sales. Like if you don't have a
Yeah,
customer, you don't have a
yeah,
business, right?
yeah,
And so that layer, that's the first part is how am I going to get some customers? Who is my customer? What am I offering? And then you just build up from there. You say, okay, where do I find, like, once you identify who your customer is approximately, right? You'll never know. Even I still don't know, right? But approximately. So,
Mhm.
okay, where can I find these people? Like, where do they hang out? And let me go there and offer my stuff, and some you'll get. So another thing is you will get a lot rejected a lot, but that's just the name of the game, right? Um, like for if you think of number of sales opportunities that you would have open to number of projects that you're doing, right? Number of people that you're giving quotes to, or number of people that are discuss, just have a conversation with you about it, potentially you helping them or working with them.
Mhm.
You maybe have 10, 20 of those in one ongoing project, right?
Yeah,
So you just got to know that that's the kind of ratio that's, every industry is a little bit different, but you got to kind of know that ratio. And then you say, okay, if I need to have 20 of these open to close one, let me make sure that I'm always uh, feeding the top of the pipeline there.
absolutely. So in the end, it's all about numbers game.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
people you
And,
are
and,
reaching?
and you improve the process, right? Like,
Mm,
what I tell you, if I was selling you something today, the very first time I sell you, it may sound like garbage, right? Because I haven't
mhm.
figured out what exactly I'm saying, but I did
Yeah,
it. That's important. Then I talk to somebody else and I'll be little, I'll learn from my previous thing and I'll be a little bit better, right? Again, I can fail and, that's fine. You go to the next one. You improve again, right? So constant like tweaking and improving, but you're doing it. You know how you said earlier about how some people uh, they overthink it, right?
yeah, yeah.
You gotta just do. You have to do, and you have to learn. Like I read a quote somewhere that the failure is the greatest teacher, right?
Yeah,
Because when you're
absolutely.
trying something and it fails, you're gonna learn way more than if you read it in a book, right? You actually
Absolutely.
doing it, right? So I would encourage people to not be you will get rejected, 100%. That's normal. That's expected. It's nothing personal, right? You just gotta keep doing it so that you find that 1 out of 20.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it all depends on your mindset. If you just keep
Yeah,
the positive mindset and keep going attitude,
yeah,
then eventually things will come into the
yeah.
places.
And you keep at it. You keep improving. You keep refining. You can't just do the same thing over and over again, right? What's the definition of insanity?
To lose your senses.
Yeah, no, the
Like,
definition of insanity, or one that I use is, you keep doing the same thing over and over again and
yeah,
expecting
expecting
different
the
results.
difference. Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely,
that's the definition of insanity, right? So you want
absolutely,
to you want to keep doing it, but you need to keep adjusting and tweaking until you hit the bullseye.
absolutely, absolutely. And it just reminds me of one thing which most of the people, one of the biggest trap, they see any shiny thing, they go after it. They are doing
Ah,
something,
yes, yes, yes.
they are doing something, but they don't stick it for too long, and they are just
Yeah,
chasing trends and shiny
yeah,
things
yeah.
one
Shiny
after
object
another.
syndrome.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So
So
how do
you
you
you know
deal with
you're in the
that?
technology space, so you know this, the shiny
Yeah,
object syndrome. I know
absolutely.
this,
Yeah,
and we've been burned by this.
absolutely, absolutely. So
Yeah.
how do you how do you keep up with that, or how do you avoid that kind of loop?
That's a tough one. That's a tough one because sometimes the shiny object is the right object.
Mm,
Um, but you do have to be careful on that one. Like in some cases, you know, if you think of technologies, um, you before you adopt this new shiny thing, you got to really think through is how is it going to give me a competitive advantage? Right? If it gives you a competitive advantage because you can do what you're offering, but for cheaper, you're still selling at the same price, but it's
mhm.
costing you less time, less money, less effort. then you can improve your margins. That makes some sense to pursue.
Yeah.
Versus it's new, everybody's, but it doesn't give you any advantage. It's maybe not mature enough, so you're gonna need some time on it. Now you're gonna be wasting, effort there. So you need to make the criteria you should be using is how does this help me provide my service better, and how does this make me more competitive,
Right.
um, without diluting my efforts.
Right. So you need to have these two things in check in order to go
Yeah, yeah,
there.
you do. Because it's very easy. Like in the technology space, especially, there's a new framework every other day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, maybe every other hour, actually, in the JavaScript world. Uh, right? So you got to say, okay, what's going to give me a competitive advantage?
And on top of that, AI is, just the cherry on the top.
Yeah, yeah, that's just a
It's
cherry on top, and that's going to change. That's going to change a few things.
mm,
We we're we're starting to maybe a little bit see the some of the patterns, but there will be some changes. I like to think of it as a new kind of SQL, right? Like SQL
yeah.
when it came with relational databases. Before that, it was like
Mm,
a very different world, and that changed all kinds of behavior, right? And same thing will happen with AI. It's going to change with all kinds of behavior, but it's a tool that we need to understand how to use and how to um, leverage and be more competitive with.
totally makes sense. And it just one thing just came to my mind, which we were discussing earlier, that you find the product market fit.
Yeah.
So I would like to dig a little bit about deeper on this one, that how do you find the correct product market fit for your business?
So not easily. Sometimes it's difficult, right?
Mm,
It does help if you know who your customer is, and the more you know them, the better, right? Because then you know what kinds of pain points and problems you're solving for them, right? Um, and you have to keep your quote unquote ear to the ground so that you're you're listening to what their needs are. You're not necessarily doing what they ask you to do. This is very important. Because what they may be asking you to do is X, but you need to look a little bit deeper and understand that maybe it's Y. And if you do Y, you'll solve this problem that they think should be solved this way, right?
right.
So you got to so have you heard of the five Whys?
Not remember.
So in lean thinking or whatever, there's this concept of the five whys. So
Mm,
so when if you were to ask me, for example, or I were to ask you, hey, so what is it that you need? And you say ABC, and I'll be asking, well, why? And then instead of just doing ABC, I ask you why.
yeah,
You
five
tell me
layers.
why. Then in there, I say, well, why do you need that? Or why you want to do this? Or what, why this? And you go
Mm,
five
like
layers
five
of
layers
this to
down.
get to the root. And then that helps you. If you understand that core problem, then there's many different ways you can solve it versus just doing the one thing.
Totally. And what do you suggest, people should go into one problem and
Hmm.
dig deep down vertical, or spread out the services? Like there are two kind of approaches.
Yeah,
There are few people, and they are offering multiple services at the same time. But the other
yeah,
group, they are saying that, stick to one offer and dig deep
yeah.
down in the vertical space.
Okay. So this, I think, I think this depends on the industry. So
Hmm.
let me explain. So um, when you have a complex piece of technology, or I mean, for us in the software space, it could be a big framework,
Yeah.
right? But for others, it could be, you know, special machinery, right? And it requires a deep understanding of this thing, right? So in that case, if you spread yourself too thin, you can't be an expert. So nobody's going to pay you like an expert.
Mm.
So if it's big enough and the market is big enough, that too, right? The market has to be big enough, then it's better to go deep because um, then people will pay you for that expertise. Because for them, it's they can't get that easily elsewhere. Um, and you can provide, again, the market has to be big enough, right? You can provide something that others can't, right? But that means that you need to be really good. You got to go deep on that one, right? As opposed to spreading out.
Totally,
So I
totally.
think this is going to become more and more important as time goes on because things are just getting more complex. They're not getting easier. Like we have to make it easier for our customers, right? But it is getting more complex.
Totally, totally. So it totally depends on, it varies from industry to industry and it's
Yeah,
subjective.
yeah, yeah, and how complex the thing is that you're solving.
Right, right. Totally, totally makes sense. And one of the very interesting thing which you mentioned that, there is entrepreneurial disease.
Yes.
So and this is so true. And I would like to know a little bit about that, where an entrepreneur starts and everything he wants to do by himself. And I
Yeah.
think most of the people are guilty of it.
Yeah. So that's, when we were talking about balance, quality of life
Hmm.
earlier, right? If you have this disease of wanting to do everything by yourself, you're never gonna accomplish that unless you take a little bit of work. Like some people, there are in certain things they know they're so sought after that they can charge a large amount of money for 2 hours worth of work or 3 hours worth of work that, it doesn't matter. So that's a different story. But for the
Hmm.
rest of us, for us normal people, um, you know, um, if you do everything all the time, then when do you have time for yourself? And when do you have time to improve, to become better? You don't, right?
Yeah,
And time is an unrenewable resource, right? I have the same 24 hours as you do, right? And how I
absolutely.
use my 24 hours and how you use your 24 hours is what would differentiate us, right? Um, and so you have to be smart about that 24. You need your, you know, 6, 7, 8 hours of sleep. You need to eat, you need to shower, you need to do these things. And so the rest of the time, if you're just working, working, working the whole time, when do you have time to improve? When do you have time to see the changes that are coming in the industry that you can prepare for? Because if you
Yeah,
don't see it, then you're going to be hit by it and you have to react. And when you react, guess what? It's just more work rather than being
absolutely.
proactive about it.
Absolutely. And on this point, I really wanna, know about your routine
Okay.
because you seem to quite achieve, which is in the entrepreneurial world, which is almost seems impossible to achieve that.
So it really depends on the phase.
Hmm.
And it's up and down for me. It's not like so in the morning I wake up, I try and do some journaling and a little bit of cleaning the prepping for the day kind of thing. So that's sometimes half an hour. That can be an hour, depending on when my first meeting is. Then there's the business day. When the business day is mostly, in my case, a lot of meetings, right?
Yeah,
Um, and And then the evening comes in. So the evenings, now that my kids are older, I don't have to do so much there. But before my kids were younger, I have to pick them up from school. I have to take them to some sports or some activities. At least over here in Canada, that's what we have to do, right?
yeah,
And so usually from 5 o'clock till about 9 o'clock, that's kind of like what I do, right? Um, and in that process, sometimes in the past, I would try and go for walks or something that to keep active because our job is mostly sitting,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then when I come home, um, in that phase of life, then from 9 till 11 o'clock or so, you put the kids to bed, you eat if you haven't eaten already. Maybe you do a little bit of reading, right? Or maybe you gotta do 15 minutes of approvals or whatever it is, right? You go to bed and then you need to make sure that you sleep enough. Like everybody is a little bit different. Like some people can get away with 6 hours sleep, some people need eight. My number is seven, right? Because the thing is that if you don't sleep enough, um, you can't make good decisions, right? You can't
Yeah.
execute properly. You don't realize this until you've done that, then you get some sleep and then you realize, wait a minute, I was like so inefficient because I was foggy all the time and I was using coffee as a crutch, right? So in that phase of life, you can't do as much because you have the kids, right? Like you're in that phase where you're bringing up other human beings, right? Which is a big job. It's not a small job.
Mm.
Now that the kids are older, my routine is, 5, 6 o'clock. So I'll eat, I'll work out, um, and then after that, if I'm not doing anything, I will do some learning. Right, so I'm either reading a book, I'm watching a podcast, or I'm watching parts of a course or something. Um, Other times, I'm meeting friends. Right, just you gotta have a social life, right? And then I try and get to bed between 11 and 12, sometimes more like 12, 12:15. I read a little bit. Next morning I wake up. I also do a little bit of reading then. So I don't necessarily like, I'm not a fast reader, um, but I'll read and, if I have to learn something deep, I'll do some reading, I'll do some audiobook, like I'll get the audiobook version of that
Mhm.
thing, and then sometimes they also have a course, right? So there's a visual or there's some podcasts on that topic or whatever. Then I kind of combine these things.
Totally, totally, absolutely love. Then, and is this the same routine which you followed when you were starting, or?
So okay, good question, good question. So when I was starting before I had the kids, right, my
Mm.
routine was uh, wake up. I've never been a morning person, right? So I would kind of wake up a little bit later. Um, I get to work like at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock in the morning, right? I do whatever I need to do. Then I
Mm.
typically, I eat like at 2, 3 o'clock. And then around 7, 8 o'clock, I would eat dinner or something like that. Then after that is when I would be able to work like deep, no distractions. That's when most of the coding happens. So my most productive hours back in those days were from 9 p.m. to like 3, 4 in the morning,
Right,
right?
right.
I would
So,
have like, I would do that. But then I'm waking up later, right? I'm not waking up at
mm,
6, 7. So I'm sleeping still 6, 7 hours. It's always been like that. I need that much sleep. The occasional time I will, not sleep when there's like a major deadline or something like that, or something went wrong. Um, but that would be back then. That was the kind of routine I would have. I was never a morning person, but I'd come in, do my stuff, I'd eat, have my meetings, and then in the evenings is when I would be doing my coding till 3, 4 in the morning. And it's like zoned in, right? I put some music, um, and I'm in there, right? That's how I built the beginning of the company. Lot like I enjoyed it. It didn't bother me.
totally, totally. And so you learned the programming and you jumped right into the building the software by yourself. right from the start.
So that was a bit of a, there was, some ups
Mm,
and downs there. So when I was interested in programming, but originally I could not get a job uh, doing that kind of program because I didn't have the degree, I didn't have the experience, and I kept, you know, tried to build relationships with the companies that were using that technology, which was Next Computers at the time, right?
mm,
And there weren't many companies here in Toronto that did that. So there was maybe 10, 12 companies, right? And I would just be every few weeks, I'd be like, applying for the same jobs. I'd be, and I was working somewhere at the time as mostly tech support kind of role, right? And, but hardware, like hardware stuff, right? And so I got laid off, and when I got laid off, one of those companies, actually all those companies I offered, like because I had unemployment insurance for just a few months from the layoff, I offered those companies, look, I will work for free. Whatever you need me to do, sweep the floors, run errands, whatever you need me to do for, let's say, 4 hours, you give me equal time on a computer, another four. I couldn't afford a computer at the time, right? So equal time on a computer, on that kind of computer because it was expensive. Um, and one of those companies agreed, right? So I would do things like sweep the floor, clean out the garbage, run errands for them for 4 hours. Then 4 hours I'd be, you know, working on the computer. And if they let me stay a little longer, then I would stay a little bit longer to learn some more. Then eventually they said, forget that, just focus on this because I was helping them build some products
mm,
and I was
mm.
getting good at it. Then that company went out of business, right? So now, but I had experience. So I went back to those other companies and I try to, again. So now this time I had some experience. So one of those other companies let me in, and that's how I kind of built my way into making software.
Totally, totally, man. It's when you dig deep down a little bit, and you come to realize that there must be some sort of hunger.
Hmm.
But there must be some sort of fire. There must be some sort of hunger. Otherwise, you
Right.
can't do it. Most of the people, they seem stuck. If you don't put your the best, if you don't have that fire in you, then this is not gonna happen.
Yeah, you need fire. You need fire. Yeah, and sometimes that fire is, getting out of the situation that you're in, right? If you, or, it could be as simple as I don't want to be average, right? Yeah, you need that. You need some fire, and something has to drive you. And for me, it was, we came over as refugees. My father died when I was 5 years old. I didn't have money. Like a lot of times when I went to school, I either had money to get to school or I had money to eat. I didn't have both. So I would
Oh.
go to school and I wouldn't eat, right? So I didn't want that kind of life. So I work. You
So
make
so
you have to make your chances.
so at that point in life, when you are in that phase of life and you are going through such kind of rough patches,
Hmm.
and what kept you going, like how did you keep your sanity in check, that I need to keep going, I need to keep going, because I've seen lots of people, they lose themselves in that phase. They lose their heart, they just stuck there.
It's a good question. So one of the things that I think helped me is that I would break down my goals into smaller ones,
Mm.
right? I naturally did. I didn't realize I was doing this, but I would break them down. And when I would accomplish one of those small things, I consider that a victory, right? So then that was kind of a positive thing, right? So instead of So even to this day, when I have a big thing to do, I'll break it down, and when I accomplish one of those smaller pieces, I'm like, I did it, right? And so I did that back then, and those victories, they help you stay, you build confidence, self-confidence,
Yeah,
right? And so that's kind of like what I did. And then also family is an important part. I had family that encouraged me, right? I had family that, they kind of set an example. For example, with me, it was my sisters, right? And my mother, right? I mean, my mother had to put food on the table. How was she had to work, being a woman, in a new country, you know, in some cases they don't treat women equally or whatever. It didn't matter. She had three children
mm,
to feed, right? So those are examples you can kind of lean on. And when you're working, that kind of person will encourage you. Typically, I've seen the situation where they discourage you, but actually I've seen that a lot where there's some discouragement, which is unfortunate, right? But that's kind of what helps you kind of go the hunger, the small accomplishments that you then use to build confidence that you can do the next one.
totally, totally, absolutely love that. And when you have this kind of mindset, then yeah, man, I need to do that. It all circle backs down to one basic thing, that what is your why. If you know that, then I think
Hmm.
it will really help you to keep going during that rough patches, during that rainy season.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And sometimes the why is just as simple as I don't want to be average.
Yeah, actually, it's a
Doesn't have
simple
to be
but
complicated.
yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You don't need to
Yeah, yeah.
overcomplicate things. So AJ, it seems like whole night is too short for our conversation, and man, I have so much to talk about, but we have to wrap things up, and
Okay. All right.
before
All
before
right. We can talk again in the future.
yeah, absolutely, I would love to have you again back on the show. And before
All right.
wrapping things up, just I have one or two questions before we wrap up.
Okay.
So we've seen basically there are two groups of people. One, they are just starting out, and one,
Mm-hmm.
they are in some sort of jobs, already doing jobs.
Mm-hmm.
So we have covered mostly the part where you are starting out and you know what you need to do. But for that
Okay.
group of people, they are doing some sort of job, day job, night job, whatever it is, 9 hours,
Yeah.
10 hours. So
Yeah.
how can they transition from that? How can they manage their time to build their side hustle, and how can they, successfully transition from that phase to being an entrepreneur and build their thing?
Mhm. So, again, the 24-hour time thing comes into play because you only have that
Mm,
24 hours, right?
absolutely.
And so, um, there's a couple of ways. One of them that I've seen. Okay, so one of them is that you kind of work your way up. That in those, let's say that your job is a 10-hour thing. That's difficult. That's a lot of time, right?
Yeah.
But if you can go to the point where you're really good at the job, you get more money for that job, but you spend the same amount that you were spending before, so you can start building up a buffer, right? And when you build that buffer, you build these savings, right? Then when this one is finished and you're looking for the next one, you can use that time to build part of your business or build part of your skills that you need for the business, right? So it's really like, you got to kind of strategically think of, okay, let me zoom out. This is my situation. This is where I want to get to. What are creative ways for me to get, and there's got to be solutions because other people have done it, right? Other people have done it.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
if other people have done it, what did they do? And find the ones that are in your similar situation. right? That their starting point is similar to where you're at, maybe a little bit different, but just close enough, and then learn from them. So sometimes reading biographies can be very useful because in the biographies you learn what that person kind of managed sometimes, right?
Yeah,
So the whole thing is that learn from others that have been in your similar situation and now are somewhere where you want to be.
totally makes sense. And you know, to have some kind of, some kind of mentors, or to have some kind of people who have been there and done that.
Yeah, you got to find them. Sometimes they're not like you don't like for me it was through books and
Mm,
that way I didn't I had some mentors but not hardcore, right?
mm,
And sometimes you don't find them, right? But then you're resourceful and I read a bunch of stuff I observed or what have you.
totally, absolutely love that. So, AJ, before wrapping this up, any last piece of advice for anyone, who don't want to remain average, just as you
Right.
say, and who
Yes.
wants to do great things and who wants to build their legacy? Any last piece of advice before we wrap this up?
Number one, maintain your mental state like we spoke about at the beginning, because without that, everything else kind of falls apart. And if you're in a bad place, figure out how to get to a good place. And then secondly, maintain your health because without the health part of it, you can't execute, right? You
Yeah,
can have the greatest ideas, but then if you're not able to execute because of health reasons, then you won't be able to, right? So those are two critical things, and always be learning. Always learn, always get a little bit better every day, a little bit better, a little bit better. Eventually, that makes a big difference.
totally, absolutely love that. And once again, thank you so much for being on the show. It was really nice talking to you, and I would definitely love
Same here.
to have you again
Same here.
back on
Thank
the
you
show.
for having me on, and it's a great conversation.
You're welcome. Take care. Have a good day. Bye bye.
Thank you.